Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Getting Real with Paula. My name is Paula Alphonse, and tonight we will attempt to break down some of the barriers that create somewhat of a racial divide. Considering everything that is happening around us in the last couple of weeks, I felt that there was a need for us to get together and have a conversation. The goal for this session is to create more of a understanding as to who we are as individuals on either side of this debate. So tonight with me, I have two guests, Sarah and Aishatu. I will ask them to introduce themselves, and then I will take back your attention and give you a little more detail. Aishatu, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi. Hello, everybody. My name is Aishatu Touré, and I'm the president of the Black Council Community, the Black Community Council here in Gatineau. I've been living in Canada for a while now. I came here, was born in Mali, but came very young, went back to Africa. So I did my junior school here, my high school in Senegal, my cégep in Gatineau, University in Montreal. So I traveled quite a bit. I've met a lot of people, have encouraged a lot of things around the world. And I also work for the federal government, and I've been involved with the Visible Minority Committee in my department. And prior to being the president of the Black Community Council, I've also been involved in other associations in the National Capital Region. That's it.
Thank you. Sarah?
Well, my name's Sarah Nyango, and I'm originally from East Africa. Aishatu is from the West, and I'm East Side. From Kenya originally. I am a translator by day. That's my day job. But outside of my day job, I am a community media producer and host of radio shows at CHUO and one TV show at Rogers Television on the Ottawa side. I also live in Gatineau. I am Québécoise through marriage to my ex. So I grew up in Europe and spent most of my adolescence here in Canada. I went to high school here and then went back to Kenya and then went to France for studies and then came back here with my then husband. And I've lived in Gatineau, in Ottawa, in Vancouver, British Columbia. And I volunteer for various organizations, including Black History Ottawa, which does the equivalent work of what Aishatu's organization does, but on the Ottawa side. I also founded Black Ottawa 411, which is a community resource, online community resource. And I've volunteered for a lot of the African and Caribbean associations over the last 25 plus years. I'm dating myself, aren't I?
Thank you, ladies. I will do a bit of an introduction because the conversation that we're going to have, I felt that you needed to know maybe a little more about me as well. I'm a mother of three, and I have three sisters. Some are in Canada, some are in the States. We arrived in Canada over 40 years ago. And yes, I'm also dating myself. And Quebec is my home. It's my home. I love people and the potential of the humankind. And because of that, I always have been a bit of an empath. And I can feel people's tension, emotion, be it fear, be it anger, be it joy, be it hope. And my sole purpose in starting the Getting Real with Paula back in March was really to create a space to help people better manage COVID-19. And then right in the middle of the pandemic, then what happened. And now there's, to me, a need for us to have a conversation, because when I think about what I want to leave behind, my legacy. It's about creating a world that is better than what we maybe came into. So it's about the future generation. And tonight, I want to hold space so that all of us can actually start hearing one another. And in order for us to do this, I need you, we, the three of us need you to be an active participant in this conversation. You can send in your live comments and question, and we will do as much as we can address it during the session, or if not, I will make sure that I respond, or through conversation with my two colleagues, respond and try and get to your answer or your question. So if before we fully delve into the conversation, I want to maybe pass on some elements that we want to remember as we're going through this conversation. First, I always say, at least my kids have heard it so many times, we are all products of our environments. What this means is that each of us has had a different life experience, different upbringing, and this according to either the countries and the neighborhoods they grew up in, or the schools they attended, and the people that they met along the way. And this has shaped each and every one of us as the individuals that we are today. You might be asking, why am I telling you this? Isn't it obvious? For me, part of the conversation is to realize that we are not, each and every one of us, a single representation of the Black, the brown, or the white reality. So I might come into a conversation thinking that they get me, they understand me, or I get them and I understand them, but there might be layers that we're not picking up. So what my guest and I are going to try to do tonight, and I'll admit we're going to be a little vulnerable, because we're going to share some of those things that we might only discuss within our own specific communities. But if we want to move forward, and if we want to find a solution to the racial divide, then we might have to start sharing a little more of these, so other people that are not part of our community might understand some of the things that we're struggling with or having to face within the current communities we live in. The intent is to create a safe base for us as a society so that we can hear and understand each other out. What dawned on me as I was looking at the various protests and some of the media coverage is that as communities, we might live in the same space, but oftentimes we don't really know each other, and we might just be tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. So whatever mistake were made in the past or offenses that were taken, it is time for all of us. And when I say all of us, not just the Black community, not just the brown community, not just the white community, but the larger ensemble, to do better. It's time to do better, and we're going to start the doing better by being a little more honest with each other, and by opening both our minds, but also our hearts, so that we can learn from each other's experience and apply it in our respective realities. I am from Haiti. The two ladies with me are from Africa. What I haven't mentioned is that I have lived in Africa. And oftentimes, because of my association with some of those realities, people might think that I am African. And they might either speak to me in a language that I don't understand, or they might make reference to things that I might not associate with. But then at the same time, we can be more than one identity within our respective reality. So tonight, We're going to start unpacking. We're going to start breaking some of those barriers by talking about microaggressions and how they shape the interactions that we have within the various communities. If I was to define microaggression, there could be 10,000 definition and interpretation. So I'm going to go to the dictionary and give you two different perspectives. Oxford Dictionary defines microaggression as a statement, action, or incident regarded as an instance of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group. Merriam-Webster defines it as a comment or action that subtly and often unconsciously and unintentionally expresses a prejudice attitude toward a member of a marginalized group. What I'm trying to say is, in this conversation, we're not saying that all Blacks have issues, have challenges, and all whites are the problem. Or all whites are racist. If I go a little further than this, it is worth mentioning that regardless of where I come from and what I have had to battle against your life, every single one of us has personal biases. Be it biases about people that have more money, less money, people that drive certain cars or whatever, we all have biases. It's not the prerogative of a particular segment or group of the society, but only when we are willing to confront and address some of our own biases and some of those limiting beliefs that we might be passing on to others, and pay attention to the impact that we might have on others, only then can we find a meaningful path forward. So, I have talked a lot. Now I'm going to bring my guest into the conversation. And I'm going to ask, let's start with Aishatu. I'm going to ask you to tell us about either those statements or those actions. One, at least, let's start with one that actually makes you cringe, but then you pretend in the work environment or in other areas of life, and you just smile through it when inside you're like, okay, there you go, Aishatu.
There are quite a few, and I love, Paula, I love the fact that you mentioned that we all have bias, and that's true. That's absolutely true. And that's not supposed to define us. We are supposed to find ways to go through those bias and better understand each other, better understand the others. And I forgot to mention that I'm from Mali. I did my high school in Senegal, but I'm from Mali. So, and that's another country. And there are differences even from one country to another. So that's kind of important to say as well. So to come to those little things, I'm going to mention one that often happens, and it's kind of funny. It's when something happens with an interaction with someone and they say or they do something and you're like, you do a funny face and their answer is, oh, but I'm not racist. I have a Black friend. So I have a Black friend, to me, does not exempt you from making racist comments or having attitudes that can be perceived as being racist. I think there is a conversation to have. There is a way to do things, but having a Black friend doesn't make you an expert on Black people. Like I say before, we are all different, and even from country to country, from continent to continent, but that's not an excuse. That's not an excuse for your behavior. And to me, when you're doing an action that to me it seems racist, we should have the conversation without thinking that, no, it's impossible for me to be a racist. it's not just being a human being racist, it's having those actions. And how do we address that? And how do we make sure that we don't repeat them? That's one of them.
Okay, thank you. She went there. So, Sarah, which one do you want to tackle?
Well, I was married to a Caucasian man from Quebec. So you can just imagine, everything that comes along with that. In Quebec, and in Canada, in fact, the number of interracial marriages between black and white is, it's going up. It was going up in the early 90s when we got married. And so it's when you have the white in-laws, right? Who, I mean, they've seen black people, they have an idea of black people, but then all of a sudden they have a black family member, and they just, they don't know what to do really with themselves too much. And it's, oh my goodness, I don't even know where to start, because of course, if you're married, when you're married to the man, people are going to start talking about, oh, I can't wait to see your little chocolate babies you're going to have, oh, what are you going to do with their hair? Do you have somewhere where you can get it done? Wow. And then there's other things they say, like, oh, can you speak African so you can hear? Your language is so lovely. Can you speak African? As if, in Africa, there's one language. In fact, Africa is probably the continent where there are the most number of languages on this earth. And you're telling me, can I speak African? And I found generally that I was expected to be in a performative role constantly, whether it was show us how your hair is done, or how do you do your head wrap, or speak African, or show us the kinds of food you eat and make it for us, like just really performative all the time. And that gets really tiring. Can I just be your family member and just have poutine and sipai at Christmas like everybody else, without everybody constantly reminding me that I am autre, that I am other, without othering me all the time. So that tended to be an issue. Thankfully, we never had kids, and we got divorced before that could happen, because I can't even imagine the added pressure and tension with children.
I will share one of mine. And this is when you're somewhere talking to someone, could be at work, could be in the community, and someone tells you, oh, you're so articulate, or God, you're different than the other Black people. What is often meant as a compliment comes out for the recipient as having been somewhat stereotyped. So even before we could start this conversation, you were assessing me, and your internal evaluation was that, oh, I think she might be a 3 or 4. And then I start talking and I say something intelligent, and you're like, oh, maybe now she's at a 7. Yeah. Doesn't make us feel great. And this is where, when we're interacting with people, we like to be seen as one individual and not as the larger group. I'll mention another one, and then I'll pass the mic on to Aisha too. I remember being, quite a few people don't know, I'm a pharmacist by trade. And I remember being in the university one day, I finished my class late, and I'm in the bus, little cubicle. And we're waiting for the bus. There's a gentleman that comes in, and he asked me, "Oh, how are you? What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm in university." And he said, "Oh, you are?" And then he said, "What you're studying?" And I mentioned pharmacy, and his face just dropped, and he just looked at me, and I'm like, "Okay." And he says, "I didn't know they were accepting you people in this program. Isn't it very hard to get into?" And you're like, "Okay." I don't want to be rude, but right there, I just didn't feel like you thought I could be, or people of my kind could be intelligent. And it's not, we're not sharing this from the perspective of saying this is what you do, or from the perspective of every person who says this, that's what they were thinking, but that's what it leaves the other person with. And that's what we call those microaggressions. Challenge is for most of us in our journey as visible minority in a large non-visible majority, it's not just your comment. There's you, there's the bus driver, there's the woman at the grocery store, there's the teacher at the school. There's all kinds of small little pokes, because that's what it feels. If you have children, and remember when a baby is young, a child is young, or we'll say they're about 3 or 4 years old, and they're pulling at your skirt, "Ma, ma, ma, ma." And then it feels like you love them to pieces, but right this minute it's like, would you stop? Reality is, for a lot of us, the microaggression feels a bit like this child that keeps pulling. So even when we're trying to push it to the side and say they didn't mean anything bad by it, this is the message. This is the reminder. So Aisha, too, go ahead. Which one you have?
It's funny. I love what you just said, and it happens a lot. And sometimes even in my family, because we are 5 kids, when people are asking, "Oh, what did you study, or are you doing?" When I mention everybody in my family, they're like, "Oh my God, how is this possible? Your mom did a great job." It's not. It's not. It's yeah. It happens, and yay, thank you, mommy. But yeah, we are really judged by little misconceptions that people have sometimes, and it's really, again, it's about having the conversation. And another thing, talking about conversations, is sometimes when you wear your African outfit, you wear it proudly. And when I wear my African clothes, it's really with pride, and it's like representing my country, my people, and it's really something that's really important for me. And sometimes when you do that, people are like, "Oh, you wore your costume today." And to me, costume is really affiliated to Halloween, or trying to be something that you're not. But when you're wearing an African print, it's not wearing a costume. It's really wearing traditional clothing from your country, and there is a history behind it. From city to city, from country to country, they're not wearing the same prints. There is a reason why. Sometimes we wear things for weddings, for celebration, kind of the same thing here. You're not gonna say to someone wearing her wedding dress, the white wedding dress, "Oh, you have your costume." No, she's wearing her wedding dress. So there is, it's not a costume. It's not made to make you laugh or to entertain you. It's to show you a part of my history, of my heritage. And then again, it's having the conversation. How do we feel that? And how is it to be proud to be able to wear your print and your traditional clothes, and show why am I wearing this today? it's because it's the celebration. Most of the time, it's because it's some celebration.
Mhm.
Maybe the national, the country celebration day. It's maybe a religious celebration. There is a meaning sometimes. Sometimes it's just because I want to represent. I have a nice skirt, a wax or a bazin. I want to wear it. I want to show my colors, and that's why I'm doing it. It's not because it's Halloween.
If I was to add something to this conversation, remember when there's a hockey game and all of a
Hmm.
sudden people show up at work and they're
Yeah,
wearing their favorite team's jersey.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Nobody ever tells them,
Oh,
"Oh, that's a nice costume."
you have your
Hmm.
hockey costume. Let's go.
It's not, and
Yeah.
this is the part where when you guys wear your jersey, whether it's for soccer, whether it's for hockey, or whatever team you're part of, it's because I'm proud and I want to show my support. And that's how we interpret it. When you're referring to our colors, the way we wear certain outfits, the way we wrap our heads, the way we choose to put shapes, colors, and types together, it's because we come from a different environment where the different outfits, the different ways of tying a headband has a meaning, but you don't know. Ask me about it.
Hmm.
Is there a particular reason why you wear that head wrap like this? Ask me, this is really nice. Where does that come from? And
Hmm.
then I can share part of my
Yeah.
history with it. But if
Yeah.
you tell me, that's a nice costume. Okay, now we're done.
Yeah, we're done. I'm
It's
out.
just right there. It
Yeah.
feels like you're making fun of me. You're making
Hmm.
fun of my heritage. That's
Hmm.
how it's received. It doesn't
Hmm.
mean that's how you intended, but that's how it's received. Do you
Hmm.
have another case you want to mention, Sarah?
Oh, you're talking to me.
Yes.
I would just add that that whole, your costume thing is sort of an extension of the performative function that certain Caucasian people feel, you know, uh, Black people are there to fulfill, to entertain, to color up the decor or whatever. Myself, I wear African attire every Friday, just like in Kenya,
That's
every Friday
yeah.
to the office, everybody wears Ankara or wax or whatever outfit. And it's not because, any specific reason or whatever. It's just, you just feel back home, people wear that as a matter of fact. It's not a big
Mhm,
deal, really.
Yeah.
mhm.
And at my work, at one point, I stopped doing the Friday thing because I found that people were coming around to my desk just to see what I was wearing on that Friday.
You were people entertainment.
That is annoying.
So now I've become the
It's not a fashion
entertainment.
show. It's not a fashion show for you. Don't come to my desk, okay? I'm just saying. Okay, that whole sort of reach out to touch my hair thing. Mm-mm.
Oof.
Oh no. Oh
No,
no, no, no.
no
Oh,
go.
please. Not even, no, that's a non-starter right there. And just even not even like you start the compliment and your hand is already reaching
In my hair.
for my
Mhm.
braids or no, no. Um, I don't know about you, Aisha too, but in my culture, like touching someone's hair, scalp, whatever, like that's so personal. It's taboo. You don't do that.
It's
You
just
don't even do that to someone you're related to, let alone, someone you don't really have a relationship with other than a work relationship.
just like you don't touch a pregnant woman's
You don't,
belly without asking.
there you go. No, but first of all, why do you even want to touch it? Well, why do you want to touch her? No, leave it alone.
Yeah, every
Admire
single
it
woman.
and leave it. Leave it. It's
Every,
her body. It's her,
that's it.
it's her intimate. Like, stop. Just admire
Just
it.
stop.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, you've seen pregnant women before. Well, you've seen Black people before with braids, with curls, with Jerry curls, with whatever it was back in the day, stand there, admire it. You can ask about it. You can ask me, oh, how long did that take? Oh, it's so many hours. Oh, wow. Did it hurt when it was being braided? Was the person gentle with it? No. And then I asked the person asking me, oh, would you like her number? Do you want braids too? You know? And then everybody laughs and, they realize, okay, I'm making a big deal about her braids. For what
Mhm.
reason? She doesn't go on and on about, I got my hair cut and I got, curls put in or whatever, you know? So this
Mhm.
whole blacks as creatures for your entertainment thing, like you have
Mhm.
to examine that, within yourself.
We have a
Yeah.
question, and Sandrine is asking, actually, she's making a comment. The whole concept of reversed racism drives me crazy. I'm going to ask you, ladies, when you
Reverse
hear reversed
racism,
racism, what does that mean to you?
to me, it's very puzzling. It's very puzzling because often, like in my mind, racism has a power dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking about, oh, the black person is racist towards a white person, well, what can a black person do in this society that could really make, all Caucasians' life hell? No, not that much. So really, the whole reverse racism thing, it's to me, it's a way of minimizing what the power dynamic actually is. And it's a way of deflecting, I find as well, often when
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten into discussions where people are like, well, you're
Mm-hmm.
just being a reverse racist. No, not so much. You all hold the power at this point. So it's not equal. There isn't the equality there.
And I see it from a different perspective. And when I say I see it, it's in the sense where there's reverse as racism, and then there's those comments about affirmative action. And to me,
Oh,
those are, you know what? You
yes,
want to
yes.
give me the sense that I'm getting something more than you could.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes is those programs are put in place because we've noticed that certain groups could not have access to certain
Exactly.
types, whether it's
Exactly.
education, whether it's work or whichever. And we have to look into it and figure out what's the challenge. It's
Mm-hmm.
like being, okay, I'll put it in a different conversation. We're talking Quebec City. I'm a Francophone. I speak English. I want my children, let's pretend we live in Quebec City, to go to a school in English. In Quebec City, if you haven't gone to school in English, your child cannot attend English school. So to me, this is what I call a barrier, because as a parent, I am trying to accomplish something for my child so that they might be more fluent in both language. But as a government, they've decided that the right to speak French in their province is more important than my wish to have my child learn that other language. So there's nothing I can do to reverse that. This is how the process has been established. Reality will always be, when we're looking at reversed, whatever process, when we're looking at reverse. So you tell me I'm ugly, and I tell you you're uglier. Whatever it is, it's because it's a response to something else
Mm-hmm.
that we might want to explore and validate what's the real issue. And that's my perspective. I'm sure you had scholars that speak on racism, and they would speak about it for days on. But as just regular people who interact, there are some elements that we want you to appreciate. We did ask for favors. We are just asking to be seen as we are and not through the lens. And sometimes it's not you personally. If we're looking at the media coverage and what is portrayed as being successful Black people, it's either you in entertainment or you into sports. And then you make a lot of money and people are mad because you make more money than they do. And the idea is that is just maybe what, 5 or 10% of the larger community. So from that perspective, if you're only showing me the people that are at the top that fits your image of success and the people at the bottom, the ones you put into jail, and you want us to say, I'm either at that top or at that bottom, then what do we do with all the people that are in the middle? And the reality is, I would say a good 75% are in between. Might have never had any problem with the justice system, but if you're seeing me as the stereotype of, if I walk in a room and all of a sudden women pull their purse and put it closer to them, then the message I'm getting is, you think I was gonna take your stuff? And sometimes in that conversation, what it tells me is that you think the only way I can make money is to force away. But I chose to have an education. I chose to send my kids to have an education. And I wish there will be one day that we look at those individuals and not look at them for the stereotypes that has been portrayed, but as individuals. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm going to let Aisha to speak, but after that, I'd like to go back to media coverage because media is my field, and I'll talk about the kind of conversations I have with my fellow journalists. So I'll let Aisha to take the floor.
Just to get a little bit back on the racism concept, I totally agree with you, Sarah and Paula. And I have a feeling that sometimes some people are not doing some reversed racism, but they're just on auto-defense. They've been aggressed so many times, micro-aggressed that they're protecting themselves from any further aggressions. And sometimes it sounds like reverse racism, but like I say, the power relation here, there's no way it could be true. And on the media, it's funny because we had that conversation with the Conseil de la Communauté Noire, the Black Community Council. The coverage of all the medias, they're all over the place right now because there is this huge thing about racism, but they're covering specifically when there are issues. And when someone is dead, when there is a blackface issue, when there is a Black man who killed someone, but that doesn't define us. That's not our community. That's not our community. This is. If I would be interested to see the statistics and to compare, because again, it doesn't represent the whole Black community. Not all Black people went to prison. Not all Black people steal drugs, but they sometimes put us all in the same box when we have that on all the communities.
So to follow up on that, again, media is my field, and a lot of the people that produce this content in mainstream media here in Ottawa that you get to see or read about are people I know. And in Ottawa at one point, Black people were exclusively visible if they were doing something wrong. So I remember in the late 80s, the Somalis, the welfare queens, the Jamaicans, the gangs, the Haitians, more gangs, oh, the Rwandans, refugees, oh, this, that, always as victims or lesser than, or, you know, involved in some form of criminality or lawlessness or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. So that was back in the 90s or so. Where I started to see a difference in the coverage is when the newsrooms started to color up a little more. And that's the thing, you know, people forget. It matters. Representation, there was some t-shirts at the protest. Representation matters. It does matter. And it matters in the newsroom where the decisions are made about what gets covered or not. If you go to most newsrooms, whether it's CBC, CTV, CSOT, whatever, you're going to see one demographic dominating everything. And you're going to see them calling the shots and making the decisions. And unfortunately, there's a lot of intellectual laziness that's been going on for too long, where, oh, if we throw up that story, that's going to get ratings and eyeballs, etc., etc. Somebody somewhere gains from pigeonholing and sort of stereotyping and just putting people in quote unquote palatable boxes. So what I've said often to my journalist friends is how unfair it is for the viewer, how unfair it is for the consumer, that all you do is put out these very reductive images of Black people. Your viewers, your listeners don't get to experience sort of the full palette of the Black experience or what Black people are in this country. They don't. And that's your fault because you're depriving them of that, right? So I would say for Caucasian listeners and viewers or whatever, always ask yourself, what are they not showing me? If I keep seeing this image over and over and over, that just can't be. You know, like not all white Québécois are like les Bougons. I'm sorry, they're not les Bougons, right? Or what's papa, mama, you know, that's not the entire breadth of the white Québécois experience. It's not. I was married into a family that had nothing to do with that. Okay. So I would urge your audience, Paula, that in terms of media and what they're seeing and consuming, they should always question and feel free to contact especially our public broadcasters, which we pay for with our taxes. Let them know that, look it, I'm offended that all you show me is this. When I know for a fact, I have friends who have this other experience. Why don't you show this? So, Aishatu, the only exception in terms of the coverage is Black History Month. The shortest, coldest month. All of a sudden, Black folks are cool. Black folks are so amazing. Oh my God,
after
right?
That, forget all about this.
So from January 31st to February 28th or 29th, woohoo!
Yeah,
we get to see Black scientists, Black authors come on. You know, kids get to see Black heroes, etc., etc., and then everything gets shut down on March 1st. Back to normal.
The one thing, and this is something that I was debating in my conversation with myself, because I do have those. Why is it that we don't share the history of Black people in Canada? Because when we studied history when I was in high school, there was no such thing as to the Black people that have been here for centuries. And there has been people. We know that if we look to the east, Nova Scotia and all of those, there's communities, large communities that are also marginalized and do not have access to wealth, like
Mm-hmm.
in other parts of the country. We
Mm-hmm.
know about where there's the priorities and the focus that is put on the indigenous group. But the
Mm-hmm.
reality is we have to stop thinking, and that's an individual choice. It's each and every one of us as human beings
Mm-hmm.
have to stop believing everything that I see. Not
Yes.
everything that the TV, the
Mm-hmm.
reality TV, the
Mm-hmm.
newscaster choose to show you.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a total representation of who we are as
Mm-hmm.
Canadians.
Mm-hmm.
So I consider myself a Canadian. I know when I meet with my family in the States, they're telling me, oh my God, can you do something about your Quebecers accent? And on the other side, I have people from Quebec that tell me, oh, you have such a great accent. So there's no winning. It's
Mm-hmm.
the sense of we are each different reality. The
Mm-hmm.
more you take the time to embrace what the other person has to bring, the
Mm-hmm.
more you show curiosity, not
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, it's like I don't want to say negative curiosity, but the more you at least pay genuine interest in
Mm-hmm.
something else,
Mm-hmm.
and the more you will discover that there's way more of us that
Mm-hmm.
do not meet that stereotype.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
we all assume, as some people assume, because I've never met one Black person,
Yeah.
that, oh, what I see on TV is it. And
Mm-hmm.
everything I see is the Beyonce. I can be honest with all of you. Beyonce doesn't prowl around her house in those same clothing that she has on the stage. Most of us don't, because, it
No.
gets cold.
Yeah.
Well, even with in those warm countries with air conditioning, this is
Yeah.
not livable.
Yeah.
And that's the part sometimes that image that I have to check it out. The same
Mm-hmm.
way I know as an individual, I might have to check out some of my perception about other individuals. And be it we're talking Asians, be it we're talking Indigenous, be it we're talking white Canadians, because there are some people that I will associate easier with, but even those people that I associate easier with are not one representation of a larger group.
Mm-hmm.
They're just one of the representation.
So I'd like Aisha too to answer the question you asked, because she and I are sort of in the same business when it comes to promoting Black history and Black Canadian history.
Mhm.
So Aisha, too, why is it that the contributions and the historic experiences of Black folks are not in our history books?
It's not. It's absolutely not. And I love to say that even myself, I consider myself as someone who love to research, love to discover new things. Before getting involved in Black History Month Gatineau, I didn't realize how Black community were really, really important in the history of Canada. And this is really missing from the books, from the schools. And I must say that for a year now, we're maybe last year we talked about that with at the council, one of the meetings, and what we are trying to do is really work on something that will be possible with the schools. So having a bit of history in the textbooks or something, we need to have something, and we need to work. We are trying to work with the school board. We have a member of the Black Community Council, Linton Gardner, who, with
Mm-hmm.
friends, he developed some tools, some games, very
Mm-hmm.
interesting. So you have a timeline. You have some cards, and you have to guess who did what in the history and different
Mhm.
fields, sport, uh, all kind of things, and that's so fun. When I realized that he had that tool, I was like, oh my god, we need that in our community, everywhere, in the schools, at the in the city council. They need to see that. They need to see that,
Mm-hmm.
because it's often really not represented as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, most of the people don't even here in Gatineau, Jean Alfred, who was one of the main political Black Asian. He was in the council. He was in Quebec Parliament. Most of the people don't even know that he was here in Gatineau. He was the first Black member. People don't know their history, and we need to have a way to advocate for that to be in the book. And this is one of the, like I say, this is one of the things that we're talking about around the tables during our meetings, and we're trying to do something. We are doing our part during History Month, like Sarah said. We always have a bit of history during that month, but Black history doesn't stop after Black History Month. So we need to have something ongoing, and now is the time. Now is the time to educate ourselves, to get to know each other, to break those barriers. Now is the time.
Yeah, and Aishatu, I'd like to add to what you said about how come, this Black history and Asian history, Indigenous, you have to remember who it is who wrote those history books. It was intentionally done so that one group would dominate the narrative, the national narrative, so that, this group is the hero and they did everything. Other people, well, they don't matter so much. Maybe they did a little something here and there, etc. But what gives me hope, because all is not lost. I mean, again, through the years, I've noticed, especially in the last decade, a huge interest in the history of Black people in Canada. People are really fascinated. And what does help is that systemically, the government of Canada, for example, has had their Black History Month campaign. They have all their posters. They have all the videos on the Canadian Heritage website. They've done heritage minutes about Black historical figures. The government of Ontario has, little modules that you can add to your school curriculum, for example. Canada Post has stamps and has been doing the stamp program for over 20 years now, because the Portia White was 1999, right? Her stamp, and recently hockey, Blacks in hockey. Look, who knew that Black people in the Maritimes came up with all these innovations to Canada's national sport. And it was greatly celebrated this year, 2020, with Willie O'Ree, the first Black person to integrate the NHL, who happens to be Canadian from New Brunswick. So people who are not Black can be very proud of a lot of contributions that Black people have made, like Elijah McCoy to the locomotive industry, for example, that sort of thing. So we have to get to a point where people are proud of the contributions by people who don't look like them, who are not from their culture or not even from their race, but proud of those contributions because those people are Canadian, like them. And these people make Canada look good. One Black person who achieved that brilliantly, Oscar Peterson. Peterson. I've yet to meet a non-Black person
think it's American. No!
So true.
Are you serious? But he's from Saint-Henri, Quebec.
Yeah.
Women, they're not looking at that. It's just that, he's doing jazz, so therefore he must be. And again, it's the misinformation. And I know we're getting to the end of our hour. I also wanted to mention. I know, it's already been almost an hour. I wanted to mention something, and this is from a perspective of every single one of us can do something to open the conversation, to stretch people's mind. I remember when my kids were in school, and we're talking about 20 years from now, when they started kindergarten and everything. Every books in the library were white people. You can tell that my kids are not blonde and blue-eyed kids. So what I started doing every single year, Christmas and end of year, I will purchase books with minorities, Asian, Latina, or Blacks, and I would give it to the school, to the teacher for their library. So it's just to let the people slowly get to the reality that, hey, those resources are available. Oftentimes, we didn't know. Outside of your environment, you might not know. I started the doll connection not because I love dolls. It's because my kids were Black, and there's only so much things Barbie can do for them. So it's how do we figure out how do we integrate those? And those are small little things that anybody can do. I can go on Amazon, if you still believe in Amazon. I can go to different platform and see books and start a conversation with that. You can take cards and learn history with your colleagues with that. So there's different things you can do. And I say that both for the Black community as the other communities. But guess what? As a generations, we are not aware or cognizant of our past. We get mad when something happened, but then we forget. And that's across. It's not just our community, it's most community, because now everybody on the internet, everybody wants to be in Hollywood, and everybody wants to make a quick buck and be rich for the rest of their journey. But we forget where we came from, and that's those things we need to pay attention to.
If I can just add to that,
yes,
people should consider, and I'm talking about all communities here, they should consider having a book or a doll of visible minority as something normal, not something exotic. And it really should be the new norm. I remember a few years ago when we will see a Black doll, we'll get the whole rack just because.
And then we give it to everybody we know.
Yes. Guilty.
Guilty.
Must be something special.
Yeah. So as we're wrapping up, I'm going to ask each of you ladies, if you had to leave one key message with our listeners, what would that be?
Well, I can start. I would say that we need to be more open to diversity and embrace the differences that we have in the society, because this is really, really the advantage that we have here in Canada. We are all human, but we are also different. If we were all the same, life will be boring. And now is the perfect time to educate ourselves, to understand what's going on, why the movement. It's not just angry people. There is a reason why. Educate ourselves, have the conversation with friends, have the conversation at the table over dinner. Now is the moment, like I say, it's time to demystify the whole racist thing.
Thank you. Sarah?
Yeah, over the last decade or so, I've heard a lot of, mainly Caucasian people talking about, oh, why do we have to be so politically correct? Why can't we call Black people this? But we hear this word used in rap music and da 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 da. Well, this whole political correctness thing, for me, you have to have a certain savoir vivre, right? You have to be able to live in society, in community with other people, and you can only do that well when you live consciously. Be conscious of what you're doing. You know what I mean? Before you blurt out the statement that you have heard might be a microaggression, just backtrack a little bit and think about it, and think about why you wanted to even make that statement in the first place. Be really aware and conscious of what you're saying and how your bias is sort of playing into your interactions with people of another race. And I would echo what Aishatu says about in Canada and anywhere, diversity really is a strength. All you have to do is look at the World Cup. I'm a big soccer fan. I'm a big soccer fan. When it gets to the point where countries like Switzerland and Germany have black players, have a large roster of black players on their team, because they realize that you can't just have, the homogenous team. It takes all kinds to make an entity strong and perform well. So don't feel threatened or intimidated by the other or the different. In French, we say apprivoiser. Learn to embrace it. Yeah, get comfortable with it. Learn to embrace it, appreciate it, and then move on. Like, don't get stuck. Don't get stuck in your prejudice and biases. Yeah.
What I would say for my listeners, potluck. Because most people will eat Greek food, Italian food, Somali food, Lebanese. And while you do that, as a group, learn from one another. So this is what I've discovered through my own journey, is that most people, most dealings, most relationships are built around food. So use that to get to know the people. So if you want to know how we cook plantain, and if you want to taste this one food that you love but you don't know how to make, let's have a conversation. Start where it feels safe to have the conversation, and then keep being more curious and learn about the other people. I don't know how many accessories I wear that started conversations, and then all of a sudden this person who maybe had no black friends, no connection to Africa or this other continent, whatever it is, all of a sudden, what if I wanted to have one? Start appreciating the beauties as it comes from different origins. And when you can see what other cultures bring, all of a sudden you start seeing the people behind those cultures. I hope this has helped in some way your conversation and your understanding. I know it's still going to be a challenge maneuvering the work. Right now, everybody happy because we're home. We don't have to dress. We don't have to put makeup on. But eventually, we're going to reintegrate work. And as we do this, try and remember some of those things we shared with you when you interact with others. And by the way, it is not just about us. Because when if you're using those same sentence, or let's just say there's a problem with IT, let me ask this Chinese guy, they're good in IT. That's a microaggression as well, because it's stereotyping, and it's understanding that every single time that I define a large group by one label, chances are I have limiting beliefs. So with this, I will say goodbye, good night, and hopefully we have helped you on your journey towards the other groups. Thank you.